As we already know, anime has a lot of transformations, and so does Kaneki. And of course, to start it off, we have Kaneki's most basic transformation. When he's like this, you can usually find him reading one of his favorite books or going out to drink coffee. And easily, his most powerful ability would be the very fact that he can eat hamburgers. That's something that this form will have over every other form that Kaneki gets. Seriously, who wants to grow a tail only to cut through steel and regenerate your body when you can always just pull up to your local McDonald's? You see, that wasn't a sponsor and the choice is always yours, but as a Ghoul, you can't do that. And that's what makes human Kaneki so special. There are no cool powers, you're just a regular guy. So if you want to really do some damage, you better start hitting the gym. Now here's where things get a little more dangerous. Through an organ transplant with the Ghoul, Kaneki now gets the abilities of a Ghoul in his hands. Or should I say, on his back. And as a Ghoul and human, Kaneki begins to develop weird tendencies. And you're wondering what that may be, aren't you? With the organs of a Ghoul inside of his body, Kaneki begins to crave human flesh. And if you thought cannibalism wasn't bad, almost everything he eats tastes like even then, there's still some good from being a Ghoul. If you were to be attacked by a serial killer, or if you were so crazy that you would take a steak knife and actually try to stab yourself with it, the knife itself would bend simply from the durability of your body alone. And that's not all, you would also have the eye of a Ghoul, which looks pretty cool if you ask me. With that being said, Kaneki begins to develop even more. And this is specifically because he trains with Yomo. By training with Yomo at Onteku, he is able to finally use his Ghoul powers so that he can protect himself, to an extent. And with Yomo's training, combined with his Ghoul-like abilities, he is able to easily break gigantic arms as if they're nothing. And this would be a feat that his normal self would not be able to do. Because no matter how much you look at it, a normal human, especially at Kaneki's size and build, would not be able to break these arms. And if Kaneki does not eat people as a Ghoul, he will no longer have any strength. And by eating people, he would be able to maintain his strength and do crazy things like break giant arms. Black hair Kaneki can also use his Kagune, but he doesn't use it that well. But he can still be used to make craters in the wall. How's that for home improvement? Anyway, you could say that this version of Kaneki is a pushover. But his other form, which would be white-haired Kaneki, or tortured victim Kaneki, that's if you want to get creative. But with this form, Kaneki becomes a lot more ruthless, and this is due to his character arc. He begins to accept the inner Ghoul that resides within himself. Think of it like a scale. With black-haired Kaneki, you have human. Now with white-haired Kaneki, you have Ghoul. With white hair, he just begins to lean a lot more on the Ghoul side of things. And in doing so, he accepts the part of himself that's a lot closer to Haise, which is why he eats her. When Kaneki had black hair and was not so good at using his Kagune, like I mentioned earlier, this was due to him holding back. But here, he fully accepts his power and what responsibilities it may bring. And by fully accepting his power, Kaneki has a lot more confidence in himself and his ability, and you will see him do crazy things with his Kagune that he wasn't doing before. He will use it to impale and grab his enemies, and also as a mobility option in order to move around in fights. And even go as far as using this other part of his body as a shield. And with Kaneki's body already being durable, you can only expect his Kagune to be that much stronger. And if you somehow manage to hurt Kaneki in his damaged state, not only can he repair broken bones in a matter of seconds, but he also no longer feels pain. And this is because he's been through so much pain while being tortured. If you were to compare what he felt now versus what he felt when he was tortured, it would be nothing. And this allows Kaneki to push through fights a lot more easily. With that being said, his strength as a Ghoul still helps him whenever he needs it to, allowing him to casually push a person through multiple stories of a building. And this is a point I was trying to make earlier. Kaneki only has this strength as a ghoul. And if you're wondering why he wasn't always doing this before, it's because now he finally accepted his power and starts using it as his own. When he is black-haired Kaneki and more like a human rather than a ghoul, he was afraid of using his powers because he did not want to hurt the people around him. When Kaneki has white hair, we truly get to see what he's capable of and what kind of combat genius he really is, because he will take the time to study the attacks of his opponent and copy them and use it against you, which is terrible on its own because he's taking someone's techniques and using that same power in order to not only rend through cement but also tear through the flesh of a ghoul, which only gives you an idea at how powerful the Kagune really is, even allowing it to slice through other Kagune and the armor of another ghoul, which is using its Kagune as a shield over top of its entire body. So yeah, Kagune are really strong, and it only gets worse from here, because Kaneki's Kagune becomes a lot stronger than usual, and this is due to the fact that he loses his mind and becomes fully blown psychotic. And with this insanity, it becomes a newfound source of power for Kaneki. This version of Kaneki would be called Centipede Kaneki, or if you really want to get technical, half kakuja. If it wasn't obvious enough, this causes the kakuja to take a centipede-like form, and not only that, but he has a lot more tentacles to attack with, and the shape of them can be manipulated at will, which is why they changed in the shape of a centipede, because this is what's on Kaneki's mind a majority of the time. This is due to the fact that during his torture, the centipede is what caused Kaneki to go insane. For the most part, he was enduring Yamori's torture to a decent extent, but when the centipede was put into his head, that's where he truly lost himself. When he gets like this, I think you should definitely stay away. And next, we definitely have one of the more interesting forms on this list, with it being Haise Sasaki. As Haise, there's definitely one thing that stands out outside of his freakishly looking hair color. Haise does not look as vicious as white-haired Kaneki, but he still retains that cold-heartedness depending on who he's fighting. When Kaneki is Haise, he's at a bridge between being a ghoul and a human, but there is a lot more complexity than that, because when it comes to the scale, he leans more towards the human side, but it's at a higher degree than before because it leans more towards the CCG. As Haise, Kaneki works for the CCG. And here you'll see Kaneki fight a lot more differently than what he's used to. He uses a Queen-K. And when he does use it, it's more or less going to be your standard katana. And you will find out very soon that Kaneki is actually really good with a sword. And this will be due to his training with Arima. And when being trained by Arima, you're probably more than likely going to be in your own league. And him using a Queen-K does not take away from anything he did before, because he still retains skill with a Kagune. And you may begin to notice that as Haise, his Kagune looks nothing like it used to. This just shows that Haise has little to no connection to Rize because his Kagune does not retain the same shape as Rize's Kagune. It looks more like a hand, and it's attached to one giant tentacle rather than the four that we're used to. And this Kagune can be seen as a reflection of Haise himself, because he really has no identity and his power doesn't really take a shape of its own. Even so, the cruel tendencies of white-haired Kaneki still exist in this other identity, which still allows him to call upon his insanity for power. And while being Haise Sasaki, Kaneki would be rated as an SS rank ghoul. And next, we have Black Reaper Kaneki. And one could argue that this is Kaneki at his most sadistic. He shows little to no mercy to anyone he faces, and his Kagune manifests into whatever shape he wants it to be. He can change it into hands in order to grab and fatally wound opponents, or like he normally gets accustomed to doing, is by using one giant tendril, and by splitting it into multiple in this way, he can catch his opponents off guard because they don't know what kind of Kagune he's going to throw in their direction. Kaneki begins to have complete control of the shape and mass of his Kagune, and the way he uses it in this form goes above and beyond what he's been doing in every form before. He can create claws and eviscerate whoever he's going up against, or completely cover himself in armor and also create traps in order to distract anyone that he's up against. His armor is so strong that he's able to block an entire Queen K with only his face. And it's not just any Queen K that he's able to block with his face, it's a Queen K made out of the owl. Kaneki's versatility doesn't even stop there because he's able to bind weapons with flesh and turn his legs into blades and so much more. And after being Black Reaper Kaneki, Kaneki begins to find a new will to live, and his hair turns white like it was before. And as I mentioned previously, he begins to take techniques from whoever he's fighting, and he's able to make an attack just like the owl's Queen K by being able to attack from underground. And not only that, Kaneki has a huge source of range with his tendril, and he can completely turn his arm into a blade rather than use it as claws when he was the Black Reaper Kaneki. One thing that is completely different between this form and Black Reaper Kaneki is the fighting style. Rather than fighting and being completely reckless and ruthless as the Black Reaper, in this form, Kaneki fights with his survival being the utmost priority. And after defeating the One-Eyed King, it would only be natural for Kaneki to claim the title, and he does just that, with this being the One-Eyed King Kaneki. And next, this form of Kaneki has a lot of drip, and this is called the White Suit Kaneki. And here you'll begin to notice that he does not use his usual Kagune, and he also begins to use Yamori's Kagune. Even so, while leading the white suits, he still manipulates his Kagune in ways so that even then, it does not resemble Yamori's. By using Yamori's Kagune alone, he would simply be holding himself back. And here, at this joint operation that he created, by becoming the new leader of the white suits, he would need to go all out to make sure that everything follows through smoothly. And outside of his original 4 tentacles, you would see him with more than 4, and this is something that would give him the edge over most of his opponents. And this transformation just so happens to be the ugliest. In this form, Kaneki literally embodies every single piece of his trauma and becomes, quite literally, becomes a monster, and he begins to fill the streets of Tokyo with his body. And while thinking of becoming this monster, he thinks of a centipede, and you can see how Kaneki turning into a dragon resembles that of a centipede, with its multiple legs kicking throughout the cities of Tokyo and him wrapping around the building of Tokyo while retaining the shape of the very insect that broke him, with it having grown multiple eyes in order to pursue whatever Kaneki wants to be destroyed, with this form of his creating flesh-like ghouls that are able to mutate into many different shapes, forms, and sizes, and eat anyone they're up against at their leisure. Whenever Dragoneki gets damaged, in response to whatever's hurting him, it will call upon multiple minions, which at times will be the same size of an army. Through sheer number alone, all the monsters that Kaneki spawns would inevitably devour all of Tokyo if it weren't for the CCG and the ghouls defending the city. And the mere size of Dragoneki alone is disgusting because everyone could quite simply just fight on it as if it's another building. But even that's an understatement because the body that Kaneki created still resides underground, and in the inside of it, you will begin to see the creation of even more of these ghoul-like monsters with even more mutations. And Kaneki would also find himself being absorbed within the own body that he created. And after being pulled from this disgusting, fleshy body, we would see Kaneki arguably at his strongest. But before we get into that, we have Gas Mask Kaneki. You know, we all just like gas masks. They look so cool. But with Kaneki's final form, you will immediately notice something different about his power, and it is the fact that his Kagune take the form of crosses, and these crosses can be used as blades and shields, and at this moment, Kaneki is insisting on fighting for the lives of both ghouls and humans rather than playing either side like he was before. He chooses to fight for everyone, and this gives him a newfound strength and set of values. While using this final form, he's able to use every single type of Kagune that you can think of. He can change his form into wings, into blade arms, into multiple tails. You can quite easily say that this is Kaneki's peak, and he can also extend the size and reach of his Kagune. Even if he wanted to, he could take any part of his own body and turn it into his sword, so he can use everything that he's learned from Arima as Haise Sasaki and use it to his advantage. At this point, there's literally nothing that Kaneki can't do in this form, making it not only his strongest, but most well-rounded form yet, because it's an amalgamation of everything he's been through and everything he's standing for. Because after all, he's fighting for everyone.